for Darwinists to crack. Because, I mean, I can't imagine how that sort of, the lung and other analogous things like it could come about as a result of the accumulation of small random changes.
For simple life forms to evolve into more complex ones requires a massive input of new information. A microbe has about 2 books of 500 pages of complex coded genetic information on its DNA. A human has the equivalent of at least 1,000 books. To transform a microbe into a human means adding a whole library of new information. So where does this new information come from? Professor Werner Gitt is a specialist in information theory and a director at the Federal Institute of Physics and Technology in Brunswick, Germany. He says the evolution of complex life forms from simpler ones by selection of lucky improvements is impossible because there is no source of new information.
The biggest problem in evolution is the origin of information. Where is the information coming from? It is impossible to come from a simple living being to an elephant or to a human being. It needs very much more information. And information cannot come in by a random process.
Darwinists say the new information comes from genetic mutations that are passed on from one generation to the next. Genetic mutations are random errors, rather like mistakes made when copying a text. According to evolutionists, the most favorable of these mutations are preserved by natural selection.
And it's the molecular genetics which finally provide the detailed evidence, the absolute knockdown evidence that nobody could possibly go against, because the molecular evidence really shows with the detail of, just like a sort of human text, you can see the changing letters, the changing words of the DNA, which are in effect describing, as generations go by, describing the anatomical changes, which are all that Darwin himself was able to see.
Genetic mutations occur when genes are damaged, often by exposure to radiation or toxic chemicals. Some mutations have no effect, but most are detrimental and they're often fatal. Although most mutations are harmful, some mutations may be beneficial. Darwin has claimed that evolution occurs when these rare beneficial mutations accumulate through natural selection. The Galapagos Islands are the showcase of evolution, where the unique wildlife is studied by international scientists. Here, tourists are shown the flightless cormorant as an example of evolution through beneficial mutation. The Galapagos cormorant has lost the genetic information for wings, and without wings, it can swim and dive quite well, which may be an advantage. Galapagos tour guides explain that because of this apparent advantage, the flightless cormorant left more offspring, and so, through natural selection, it survived, while the other birds with wings died out.
Flightless cormorants are really degenerate mutants with a loss of information for making wings. All examples of mutations are actually loss of information, even the favourable ones. There is no new genetic information. Claimed examples of evolution in action are actually examples of variation within a kind. Antibiotic resistance, insecticide resistance, peppered moths, all these are examples of rearrangement of existing genetic information or loss of genetic information. There's no new genetic information.
If you reject the sufficiency of chance, undirected chance, as an explanation for biological phenomena as we see them on Earth, then you have to have some form of design hypothesis. This is the only alternative available. I think when you look at the laws of nature and you look at the cosmos, you have these two conflicting possibilities. You have the possibility of the transcendent Hebraic God who created the world and organized all the laws of nature to this end, or you have the other possibility that somehow the universe is a living whole, a self-organizing system.
At the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, Orthodox Jews worship the God of creation. According to the book of Genesis, it is by design, not chance, that we came into existence. Israeli biophysicist Dr. Lee Spetner is uniquely qualified to comment on the role of mutations in evolutionary theory. A specialist in the physics and mathematics of information, he has researched the signal-noise relationships in DNA as a Johns Hopkins University Fellow. He has published in leading journals on theoretical and mathematical evolutionary biology. He believes the evidence supports the biblical account that God created certain basic types which have, through time, diversified as they adapted to their environment.
I really do not believe that the neo-Darwinian model can account for large-scale evolution. What they really can't account for is the buildup of information. It's very improbable that there can be many small steps of evolution, many small changes adding up to one large change. And not only is it improbable on the mathematical level, that is theoretically, but experimentally, one has not found a single mutation that one can point at that actually adds information. In fact, every beneficial mutation that I have seen reduces the information, it loses information.
Australia's Royal Show in Perth is the place to show off your purebred. If it cannot be seen that mutations and natural selection increase genetic complexity, what about artificial selection? Selective breeding does produce great variety, but is there a limit to the change?
Charles Darwin himself made great play of domestication. And a nice way to look at this is to say, suppose you wanted to do an experiment to actually demonstrate experimentally that this process of selection worked. What would you do? Well, what you'd do would be you'd say, well, it'll take me about 1,000 years, but given 1,000 years, what I can do is in every generation, I can breed for those qualities that I want to get. So for the next 1,000 years, what we're going to do is in every generation, we're going to mimic natural selection by choosing for breeding those individuals which most embody the qualities that we admire. So if you can go from, say, a wolf to a Pekingese in a few thousand years, then you have to extrapolate that process and say how much further could you go in 1,000 million years.
You can breed dogs for thousands and millions of years, but if you have no source of new genetic information, they'll still be dogs. The problem with evolution is it has no way of providing new genetic information. Both natural selection and breeding, or artificial selection, cause loss of the genetic information. If we take a long-haired dog and we only breed from long-haired dogs and just select the long-haired pups and let them breed in the future, then we end up with a variety of dog which concentrates all the genes for long hair in one variety. But that means that that dog can never breed a short-haired dog because it does not have the genes for short hair. So we've lost genetic information. Natural selection does the same. If we take wolves, varieties of wolves before the Ice Age, long hair, short hair, and during the Ice Age, the extreme cold resulted in the killing off of the short-haired wolves. We end up with a new variety of wolf, even a new species with long hair, which has adapted to cold conditions. But this adaptation, again, is not involving